What's going on, guys? It's me here back with another First Descendant video. For this video, I'm going to be going over some Yujin builds with you guys. Now, I do have a bossing oriented setup, and that is going to be using his duty and sacrifice mod. So that is focused on being a support DPS. However, you can lean more towards the support side or the DPS side, depending on the boss and your team and how you want to play. So we'll get into some flex options with that as well as I go through that build. And then I also have a mobbing setup for you guys, which is going to be using the same exact polarities. That'll be towards the end of the video. His mobbing is actually quite good, but I would primarily recommend using him for bossing content, specifically a harder bossing content. Right now we have Gluttony, where Yujin is very strong, and as harder colossi start to release into the game, Yujin is going to be extremely important. So hopefully I can make that clear to you guys as I go through this video, but I would absolutely recommend investing into Yujin to have him available. He can carry runs that seem completely doomed. It is probably going to be extremely important and extremely sought after for the next Colossus that's going to be releasing, as well as future content. Again, we're getting like harder dungeons in October, so depending on how hard those are, you may really want a Yujin in your group for those. Just something to keep in mind. I think he's going to become more and more important with every single patch, so I would definitely recommend building him. Also, he's just extremely fun in my opinion and underrated. Anyways, let's not waste any more time on the intro here. I am going to quickly explain the healing scaling on Yujin. I'm going to give you guys a quick summary of what you're going to want to scale your healing as much as possible without overdoing it. I'm also going to go over what actually works for healing your teammates and what doesn't. I tested this with a friend. We'll quickly go over that now and then get into the build itself. Now, to explain the healing scaling as best as I can, we first need to look at the actual ability here that we're going to be using, and this is the duty and sacrifice transcendent module. This modifies our 4/ our ultimate. So firstly, it lowers the cooldown down to 50 seconds, so that is very important. But the big thing here is it essentially releases a giant AoE heal. If there is a range, it's insanely high and I wouldn't worry about it. This heal releases a initial heal that's going to do a lot of healing, and then it also regens health over time. Right now you can see as a base, it's going to do 5 seconds of extra recovery after that initial burst of healing, and it heals once every 1 second in that case. Now, if you look at the bottom of the mod here, it says this skills recovery increases only when the total amount that make up skill power reaches a certain amount. What that amount is, I'm not entirely sure, but rather than trying to figure that out, I just tested modules, tested reactors, and eventually figured out where that kind of threshold is, because there is a point where once you mod a certain amount of skill power, and once you have enough skill power on your reactor and stuff, that your healing basically just doubles. So I'm going to go over what's important to that, as well as some additional healing stats that you may want to look at after that. So first, let's get into the importance of skill power and skill power modifier. So to actually break through that threshold of healing, you are going to need both your skill power and your skill power modifier modules in this case, which the focus mods are enough. I did test them and they do break the threshold. You are going to want focus on non-attribute and focus on fusion, because we are using a non-attribute fusion ability as our main source of healing. Now, the other important thing is that you do need a matching reactor. In my case, I have 26k max health, and the initial burst of healing puts me at around like 22k, and then after 2 or 3 ticks, I am at full health. Without this, I end up healing at the end of my heal about 15k total, so it pretty much doubles the healing, and this is going to affect all your teammates. Skill power and skill power modifier affect your healing towards all your teammates. Now, the other two stats that are important to mention is we have HP heal. Now, HP heal is a massive boost to healing, and it also affects your healing towards your teammates. So HP heal is very good for Yujin. Just to give you an idea, when throwing on 30% HP heal, that 15k heal from a base level went to about 20k. So it is basically taking that 15k, grabbing 30% more, and just throwing it on top of that. That is pretty much how it's working out in terms of the numbers. And again, that's also going to affect your heals towards your teammates. Now, the other stat that we have is HP recovery modifier. This does affect your self-healing. That 24% again is going to grab 24% or whatever of the 15k and heal you for that extra 24%. However, HP recovery modifier does not affect your healing towards your teammates. So ideally, you want to try to avoid this, and it's pretty easy to avoid. Just don't mod it, because we have HP heal options. If you want to get a little more healing on top of your already enough healing, you can use HP heal, but definitely avoid HP recovery modifier. That is the TLDR. Everything affects your healing towards your teammates except for HP recovery modifier, and you need a certain amount of skill power and skill power modifier and base skill power to be able to break break the threshold on your healing to go from, say, that 15k to 30k with just breaking the threshold. So those are kind of the important things to note about his scaling and healing, and that's going to play into our build here. All right, so first I'm going to go through kind of a core setup with you guys, and then we will talk about flex options after this. But I use this setup for just about everything, and it makes you insanely tanky, infinite heals, and you still do a ton of damage. We have our Transcendent mod, which just gives us this insanely OP AoE heal. For your sub slot, you can use pretty much whatever you want. I like using long distance maneuvering because typically when I'm playing Yujin, I am looking to grapple the boss so that my team can do damage. I usually am not prioritizing damage with Yujin, so I'd like to grapple and kind of give my team the chance to do as much damage as possible. And I'm also used to grappling and knowing when to hold on and whatnot, so I like just doing that. So this helps a lot with grappling. Besides that, again, it's pretty much personal preference. You could use mid-air maneuvering or whatever you really want there. Now with this build, one of our priorities is survivability, and that is because if you are alive, then technically none of your teammates can really die. You will be able to res them extremely fast and heal them extremely fast. So the first thing we're going to cover here is self-survivability, because you being alive means everyone else is alive. That is pretty much the way I see it when I'm playing Yujin, and it is typically the case. So we are going to take increased HP, and we're also going to stack more HP with HP amplification. We do lose some shield, but again, shield kind of whatever. We're going for HP and defense here, so don't worry about the shield loss. Now we are also going to take one increased HP mod just to get that extra defense. Now every boss in the game on hard mode has a split of a firearm attack and then some sort of element. So defense is actually only going to mitigate the firearm attack portion of the damage for their attacks. In Gluttony's case, for instance, it does a ton of chill damage. It still does a very high amount of firearm attack damage. The split, I want to say, is like a 40-60 firearm to chill. So the defense is still going to be helping to mitigate that 40%, but it's not going to help mitigate that 60%. So we are only taking one defense mod here, but this is going to help us against every boss in the game with their firearm attack split of their damage. Now to help with that other split of damage, as well as more of the firearm attack damage, you can take incoming damage modifier. So the first way we're going to take this is through auto immunity, and essentially this is just 10% flat damage reduction to whatever damage we take. It's going to get reduced by 10%, and this is going to apply to elements, it's going to apply to defense, everything. So very, very strong. This is going to help us to mitigate all that elemental damage, as well as again contributing to mitigating the firearm attack damage. Also, this gives us a little HP recovery, which again does only affect our self healing, but it's going to help us to heal ourselves for more, so it's still good. And then we're also going to take safe recovery. We get more incoming damage modifier, so now we have a total of 15% flat damage reduction, and this also gives us that HP heal of 17.2%. Now because we are building enough skill power to break the healing threshold, that extra healing isn't completely necessary, but it essentially makes it so every time you heal, everyone's just going to be completely maxed out on health and shield. Doesn't really matter, so still really good to have there, and it's just going to help make you a tanky monster. Now the next thing we want to prioritize is going to be a skill cooldown, and that is because we want to be able to use this on demand. If someone takes major damage, including ourselves, we want to have this up as much as possible to be able to heal ourselves. The duration is not really important. The initial heal is the big thing, and because of the mods we're using, it's essentially going to heal us for all of our health and shield off that initial burst anyways. So you want to try to get the cooldown on this as low as possible. And for this, we're going to take MP conversion for the 36%, nibble fingers, and then our two focus mods here give us another 12%, leading us to a cooldown of around 9 to 10 seconds, depending on your reactor, which I'll talk about after we get through the modules here. But again, you want to try to get that as low as possible. Now you may be thinking, well, won't you have mana problems? It costs 60 mana, it's on a low cooldown. Don't worry, I'm going to go over all of that stuff, so just stay with me there. Now the last mod we're going to throw in is Passionate Sponsor. This essentially gives us a 75% extra firearm attack, and it's almost up 100% of the time because of how short our cooldown is here. If you're just kind of popping this off cooldown, every time it's taking on allies, it's resetting the stacks on Passionate Sponsor. So you're essentially going to have a 75% firearm attack boost at all times. Really nice. It also gives you a 75% skill power modifier boost at pretty much all times. So here's something important about this mod in relation to our other mods. I've been talking about the healing threshold thing and how you need to have both of these mods to actually hit that threshold. However, with Passionate Sponsor, we have the 7.5% skill power modifier. Now, what does this mean in this case? Well, essentially it means we can take off Focus on Fusion. Now, the reason for that is we are getting the 75% skill power modifier from Passionate Sponsor. However, if you don't have the 10 stacks, you aren't going to get that massive healing bonus from Passionate Sponsor. So, you know, on your first heal of the boss fight, or if you have downtime on Passionate Sponsor, which is pretty uncommon, but it can definitely happen, then that heal whenever you don't have stacks on your Passionate Sponsor is going to be closer to that 15k heal. Obviously, you're going to be benefiting from safe recovery, so it'll be closer to maybe like 18k if you have 26k health in my case, but it's not going to be anywhere close to the 30k that you would get with the focus on fusion. So this is kind of a personal preference thing. Obviously, you also lose the cooldown here, so I prefer to run with focus on fusion because of that. It gives you 100% reliability on getting that massive heal. But if you would like to open this slot up to something else, you do have Passionate Sponsor to be able to do that, but just remember, you need to make sure you're constantly keeping your stacks up. All right, and now we're going to get into some of the flex options. So a great flex option if you are having mana issues is that you could drop safe recovery or auto immunity for a strong mentality without having to recatalyze anything. So in this case, you could put strong mentality here if you want, or you could replace auto immunity as well. If this still isn't enough mana for you, you can also throw an enlightenment over auto immunity. Now you are going to lose quite a bit of tankiness, so I would try to at least keep auto immunity in there, but those are some flex options that you can make if you are having mana issues. Now, if you want to go for a more damage oriented build, for instance, you could throw in something like shot focus instead of auto immunity, and that would give you some more firepower along with the Passionate Sponsor. This is a good amount of firearm attack damage. And then another option you can make if you don't feel like you're really utilizing the cooldown on your ability as much, what you could do is also replace something like MP conversion with time distribution. This is going to make you tankier. Now, it does bring the cooldown up to 20 seconds as opposed to like under 10. But again, if you're not using the cooldown as much and you just want to be tankier, that is a available flex option. I would say it kind of depends on the boss fight as to how often you're going to be having to use your ultimate. So those are just a couple flex options. There's plenty more you could do with these two slots here. If you really don't want to use Passionate Sponsor and you really want to just focus on being a support, you could throw in like auto immunity here and then throw in maybe enlightenment there, so you're not having any sort of mana issues and you're tankier. But essentially, you guys get the idea. There's a lot of different swaps that you can make here depending on what you're doing. Maybe you want to go full support, maybe you want to be more on the damage side. And again, if you aren't utilizing the 9-second cooldown, which you definitely will in Gluttony, but I'm not sure as far as other bosses, and I assume for future bosses you're probably going to be utilizing it because they're going to get harder, I would definitely recommend sticking with the cooldown. If you do have mana issues, which I haven't really had, you can change some mods here. All right, and then building off of the modules to kind of help with other mana issues, you can actually use your Inversion reinforcement abilities. So this is what I'm using right now. I'll quickly show you guys, but I have biodensity augmentation. This essentially just makes it so you get 10% extra health when you kill something. So if the boss has ads, you can kill the ads and you'll get some extra health for 30 seconds, and you can stack that up to 5 times. If you stay on top of that, you can get basically 50% extra health as long as you are killing ads. Now, this is the big thing for helping with mana: selective neurostimulation. Every 60 seconds, it's going to pop a random buff, which can help you see here, with your mana recovery. So this does end up helping, especially in those longer fights, with maintaining your mana pool. But also things like immunity phases are going to help you a lot with maintaining your mana pool, because typically when the boss goes immune, you're going to get a lot of MP recovery out of combat. With all this together, you shouldn't have mana problems, but if you do, again, you can use modules and then selective neurostimulation to kind of help with that. And the last thing I have here is just void adrenaline. There really wasn't any other choices, so just a little speed boost if you get low. Something nice to have, but not really necessary. All right, now going into your reactor, like I said previously, you are going to want a matching mounting, and this is so you break that healing threshold and pretty much double your heal. So in my case, I like using a Greg's Reversed Fate with Yujin. There are some viable options. Specifically, I would stick to one of these 3 weapons here. Divine Punishment is okay. If you have it maxed out, it is pretty good. It lets you essentially drop like nimble fingers on your build and kind of open up a mod slot, but it's going to do a lot less damage than your Enduring Legacy or your Greg's Reverse Fate in boss fights. So it's kind of a trade-off there, but you do get that extra module slot. So it's not a horrible weapon to use with Yujin, but just not my personal choice. I like Greg's and I already have it maxed out, so I'm using Greg's personally. Now, the big thing for the substats on the reactor is skill cooldown. That is the big thing. You definitely want to get skill cooldown. I would say the second most important thing is going to be either skill cost or something like skill duration would also be nice. Even skill effect range, because it does affect his 3, which essentially gives all your allies in a certain radius around you a bunch of damage reduction for a certain amount of time, but the range is really small. The base range is like 6 meters, so skill skill range, not horrible, but I would definitely try to get skill cost with this or a skill duration with this. And then for our modules, we're going to be stacking a ton of HP and then enough defense to also be tanky. But the reason we want to go for a lot of HP is because your healing is based around your max health. So the more HP, the more you're going to be able to heal yourself. Now, obviously stacking too much HP without enough defense is going to give you diminishing returns because the defense is going to reduce the damage on your health. But this amount here I've found is a perfect balance. It makes you insanely tanky, including eating multiple shots from Gluttony, but we're going to be stacking health here. All my auxiliary power, I have max HP, and then MP recovery out of combat. You definitely want to get that. Now your sensor is the absolute most important. You want to get as high a max HP roll as well as high of a MP recovery in combat roll as possible. This is going to help you alleviate those mana issues so that you hopefully don't need any sort of mana mods. And as you can see, the set effects here don't really matter because I'm trying to just stack as much HP as possible. I haven't really worried about set effects, and none of these set effects are going to do a whole lot for you anyways, including like the annihilation set, because you're constantly going to be healing yourself. So I just opted for survivability because, again, like I said, if you are alive, then your team is alive whether they're on the ground or not, because you'll be able to go res them. All right, and then for your backpack, HP, and then you want a defense roll as high as possible and a MP recovery modifier roll as high as possible. That's going to help your passive regen on your mana so that you have more uptime during the fight, and again, don't have those mana issues. And then the last thing here is going to be your processor. You want to get as high of a shield roll as possible, and then the other roll doesn't really matter. I just have toxin resistance here, which actually will be helpful with the next Colossi, which also reminds me, if you go back into your mods, another flex option, you can throw these mods in here, and depending on which one you're using, you can also build that on your component. And if you want to max out these mods, then you'll get a lot of that resistance, which actually will make you quite a lot tankier if you have a gold roll on that component. It is a little tricky with chill resistance specifically because that is on your sensor, which is the most important by far to keeping your mana pool up as high as you can. So if you do end up using the chill resistance and replacing MP recovery in combat on your sensor, I would definitely recommend using something like strong mentality here to help with your mana, or you could also just use maximize conservation. That will help you a lot as well. So if you are using the chill resistance and putting chill on your sensor, definitely use it with a skill cost reduction mod. And again, you don't really need to max this mod out. The big thing here is the immunity, but it also does give you some extra resistance as well if you have it in the first place on your components. So I'm going to show you guys some Yujin gameplay here, specifically for Gluttony. I think it's the best way to showcase how strong Yujin is and show you guys how much damage he can actually eat, how much healing he can do, and just how strong he is in general. So you do a lot of damage. You are constantly able to just eat shots, res your teammates, do whatever you need to do to keep everyone alive. The big thing in terms of Gluttony is obviously having the team do the mechanic for cooling the boss down, but you're able to pretty much cover everything else, and obviously can help with the mechanic too, but you're able to cover a lot of damage as long as you have a good weapon and you are keeping your passionate sponsor stacks up. You're able to cover grappling the boss and things like that because you can get in its face without worrying too much about dying because of how tanky you're going to be with this setup. You can get your teammates and res them and even eat a shot or two while resing them. You can heal your entire team pretty much off cooldown. So you're doing a million different things. You're essentially playing 5 characters at once for your team. It's extremely powerful. So that is kind of just the gameplay that I'm showing here. You can see the grappling and the resing and also just doing a good amount of damage. In some of these runs, I did like 60 to 70 million while supporting the team with all kinds of different stuff. So you can play this however you want. If you want to be more damage oriented, again, you can change your mods to do that. If you want to be full support, you can do that. If you want to be a mix, you can do that. Typically, I like to play it kind of in a mix style in which I'm, doing a lot of damage, then doing grappling, then healing the team while I'm doing damage. And then if someone goes down, I'll go res them, come back to the boss, start doing damage again, pop healing when someone takes a lot of damage, whatever. But this character is extremely powerful and extremely underrated. We're going to get a lot of future Colossi that are going to hit like trucks and have mechanics, hopefully not linked to mods, but have mechanics. And Yujin is going to be a absolute savior, especially in pugs, but probably in pre-mades too. And then we also have harder dungeons coming out. So do not sleep on this character at all. I would just get him going now. Who knows when we're going to get the ultimate version. And when we do, I'm sure we'll have the progression carryover. Hopefully anyways, by then maybe I'm coping. But all right, and now let's get into the mobbing setup here. Now the mobbing setup is going to be around the Proliferating Allergy Transcendent mod. Essentially what this does is turns your 2 ability into a coronavirus coronavirus that you throw onto an enemy, and either you kill the enemy and it blows up in a radius and hits everything else, or you wait the timer out, in this case 5 seconds, and then it blows up on everything around it. So having durations actually kind of counterintuitive on this build, because if you just throw it at an enemy and then you run off and try to go kill other enemies, the shorter the duration, the faster it's going to end up blowing up on that enemy if you don't end up killing them. All right, and for this setup with the polarities that we have, we're going to look to get low cooldown as well as a good amount of damage and some skill cost reduction as well to let us spam R2. So we are taking the same HP mods as the bossing setup here, just for a little bit of tankiness. Again, we have MP conversion as well as nimble fingers, and we are going to be using a focus on non-attribute, not focus on fusion or anything like that. And the reason we're only using focus on non-attribute is because our percents on the ability, which is our skill power modifier, is already very high. So adding more skill power modifier is not going to do a whole lot. Rather, we want to add skill power to scale that damage up. So we're only going to be using the skill power mod, so focus on non-attribute. Then we're also going to be using skill expansion, and that is going to make the radius of our plague explosion bigger. You can also get skill range on your reactor to get this pretty much capped out, but I unfortunately don't have that. But you'll want skill range on your reactor along with skill expansion. Then we have strong mentality again for some of that skill cost reduction to help us spam more. And we also have a frugal mindset to help us spam even more, as well as giving us some extra range again on our explosion here. And then last, we're going to be taking dangerous ambush. Skill power is the best thing for this here, and dangerous ambush is just incredibly strong for literally everything, including mobbing. So it will help you do a lot more damage overall as you're doing mobbing. Definitely recommend it with this build. And then we just throw shot focus in here for a little bit of extra firearm attack. The skill power modifier isn't going to really reduce our damage, and the firearm attack is just going to let us mob a little better. I threw that in. You could throw, you know, whatever you want there really. You could use passionate sponsor if you're playing with other people, and then change dangerous ambush to whatever you want to, but I'll be just sticking with shot focus here. Then I'm not going to go over flex options. They're pretty clear. If you need to swap like a tank capacity out with something else, you have options here, but I found that just using this in general has worked perfectly fine for this build. Now for my reactor, the sub rolls are not good on this. Don't roll this, but make sure you have a matching reactor obviously to whatever weapon you're using. So in my case, I'm using Enduring Legacy for mobbing. What you want to look for here is going to be skill cooldown, or a singular boost damage is also really good. Non-attribute is okay, and then one of those, plus I would say try to get skill range again to kind of max out the explosion range of the plague itself. And then for your components, you can pretty much just go with the Slayer set. I've been using this and not really having mana issues with this build, and again, same exact sub rolls as I was just talking about. I don't have the MP recovery modifier in the backpack unfortunately, but same rolls that you always roll on these for someone using mana. That's pretty much it for the components there on the mobbing setup. And then here is an example of the mobbing setup. Again, you're pretty much just throwing your coronavirus onto different enemy packs and shooting them, blowing them up, running to the next one, throwing it at them, blowing it up. There is a mod called Arc Acceleration that some of you may ask about. I don't really think it's worth using because it just makes your throw go a little bit faster. And as far as the range increase that it says it has on the mod, it doesn't seem like it's working. So I just don't use that. I don't think the acceleration is worth it anyways, but I figured some people may ask about that. So it does work. It will make your projectile go faster. So if that is your question, there's your answer to that. But I personally don't use it. I don't find the need for it. But yeah, the mobbing setup, Yujin is really strong at mobbing. Obviously, he's not like a Viesa or a Bunny or something like that, but very good. And one last thing, I did try his first aid mod because it looked really cool. Unfortunately, the healing on it is just bad. It's nowhere close to Duty and Sacrifice, and it also relies on your teammates to actually run over your medkit packs. It does give a little defense boost and actually a toxin resistance boost, which could be good for the next Colossi, but the healing itself is just so low that I found that it's not worth using currently. Hopefully they'll buff it, and then his other mod essentially just heals him when he's healing other people. It's pretty much pointless because Duty and Sacrifice, you can just heal yourself with one button from 0 to 100 whenever you want, so that mod is completely pointless compared to Duty and Sacrifice. Unfortunate, but that's how it is. Anyways, that is gonna do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video and you aren't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. If not, no worries at all. I appreciate you watching. Also, I haven't really announced this in a video, but I do have a community Discord. It's a lot of fun in there. We talk, we hang out, people find groups and stuff, post screenshots and share builds and all that kind of stuff, ask for build advice. So if you do want to be a part of that Discord, I will link it in the description of the video, as well as all my videos across the channel. Shout out out to my supporters on Patreon, my Twitch subscribers, and those of you supporting me through the Nexon Creator Program. I appreciate you guys so much. I will also leave links to all those in the description if you would like to support me in that way. But I am now running out of breath on this one, so I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. I appreciate you listening to my yapathon, and I will catch you in the next one.